You want more?
I can take a square. Square.
And can I get you a decaf?
Bebida? You got bebida?
Yes, a bebida caliente.
You good? Anything else, John? You good?
Nah, he's a farmer after all.
He is. He really is.
That's how I feel. Oh, yeah. You get that sometimes, Paul. Yeah.
Seems to be a little more often lately.
It's like
As the years go by.
the over 40 crowd.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man.
It's thankfully not roasting.
Yeah, it's really beautiful out today.
And
Do you need AC, John, or is this good?
thank you. Cheers.
Do you need AC, or is this good?
No, it's pleasant. It's good. It's really pleasant. Thank you. That's cute. Okay, you ready?
Sashi Pukhi Jishin Metotran Riral Lingshi Nyinde Yampadi Sange Shindu Mite Guargi Drogun Namda Shima Chuparsho Hidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami Sangha Jidang Zoki Choknam Janchu Bardu Dakni Gapsuchi Daki Chinyengi Petsanangi Drola Venjir Sangha Parsha Sangha Jidang Zogi Jognam Janchu Vardu Dakni Gapsuchi Daki Chinyengi Petanangi Drola Venchir Sangha Parsho Sangha Chidang Zogi Jognam Janchu Bardu Dakni Gapsuji Daki Chinyengi Petanangi Drola Venchir Sangha Parsho.
So please, let's relax our minds by doing a brief breath meditation. And listen. Count the rounds, beginning with an exhalation. Do 21 rounds. Put your mind into a neutral place. Disengage from prior activities and thoughts. Create a new platform for the evening. As you breathe out, release all thoughts and concepts. Practice abiding free of constructs. As your mind stills and becomes calmer, see if you can simply abide without coarse, dualistic thoughts filling your mind. See if you can abide in a peaceful, still, calm, focused place. Cultivate a joyous, uplifted, blissful, ecstatic feeling as you abide. Try not to think, just try to feel. So, homage to the Dharmakaya, bliss preceding emptiness, and the manifestation of every form, holy form. Thank you for coming tonight. So this is our goal as we meditate, and as we practice, and as we keep our vows and our ethics and our practices to attain this deep single-pointed abiding with a very blissful mind state, such that we can achieve the union of the two, bliss and emptiness, simultaneously. So nice to practice every day, or at least a little bit. So tonight is the review class for course 17. I think we'll start easy, which is, which courses are we reviewing? Which courses did we review? Which are
Diamond cutter. The diamond cutter.
6 was, this is
7 is
6 was yeah, diamond cutter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's harder
7
from here,
is the-
guys.
Bodhisattva vows
Okay.
is 7.
Is it the ethical life? Is that?
Yeah, that's
Ethical
in there.
life.
And then the three guides.
We did two
Uh, 2 guides? Oh.
Haven't done wisdom yet.
It's all downhill from here, people. You missed one.
We do death in the realms of existence. Yeah, that's a great class. Yeah.
So let's do a list. What's
No, we didn't miss that. He said that.
Oh, did you say
Yeah.
that? Okay, so we had
Yeah.
the diamond cutter.
Yeah.
Did it go death in the realms, or did it go?
No.
It went
Bodhisattva
death,
vows.
Bodhisattva vows. Then it went ethics, and then it went death and.
And then the first part of the guide to the Bodhisattva's
Okay.
report, right? So those are the original courses that we reviewed, those 5. So the idea here tonight is to talk about the most important things from these, scores of hours of material. And I suppose, I have to say, from a big picture perspective, perception is reality, from a Buddhist practice and path standing. Perception is reality. We have our current perceptual faculties, mind, senses, organs, conceptualizations, right? Subject-object identification, etc., go on and on, right? As to how we perceive and how we dualistically relate and identify with things, right? It doesn't have to be that way. It's not the only type of perception. It's not the only type of reality. And so, really, all of our Buddhist paths and practices are geared towards moving from the type of reality we have, the type of perception and valid experience that we have now as human beings, to much better, to a reality which is blissful, pure, and paradisical. So it's very easy to get lost in the forest for the trees, to lose the big picture. So the big picture for us is, how do we change from the type of being that we are, right? Where we have this valid experience and this valid perception of this valid human reality. How do we change from this to a perfectly pure, enlightened, paradisical way of being and living and full reality, right? And so it's about our senses, it's about our mind, it's about our projections, right? It's about how we go from being a fairly coarse, crude, non-virtuous, afflicted being to a pure, virtuous, holy being, experiencing everything as blissful and ecstatic. And so, that is the big picture overview that subsumes all of the materials that we teach, week after week, year after year. We can talk about these meditations, and these paths, and these practices, and these vows, and wisdom and compassion, and ethics, and 3 principal paths, and on and on and on. All of it is wrapped up in that idea. All of it is in service of that idea. All of it is to accomplish that goal, to take us from the mind, the imprints, and impulses that assert themselves in our mind and body, to take us from suffering crude impulses and thoughts and emotions, which were caused and which are forced upon us, which we have no control over in the present moment. How to go from that to a reality and a way of being which is pure and utterly and completely happy. So, I was thinking of your comment in the board meeting, the Three Jewels board meeting the other week, which was, this doesn't feel very nice. I don't feel very happy.
Mm-hmm.
And our practice, our experience in the present is caused. We are living out past causation in the present moment. Present moment is an expression of past causation. We collected causes in the past, which bring their result in the present moment, which are experience. And what we do in the present moment and how we live in the present moment creates causation for the future. And so the present moment is a combination of riding past ripenings, for better or for worse, and having the wisdom and the knowledge and the training and the force of intellect and discipline to be able to stay present and stay centered and stay virtuous to set up the causation we want to create the future we want. And so, very important to never lose sight of the fact that the present moment is simply where we do the work to create the future we want. The present moment is not where we reap the results of our present actions. And as sort of beings that want instant gratification, we want the results of our present actions to come within a few seconds or certainly a few minutes. And it typically doesn't work that way. From when a cause is put in place to a result, right? We see it in the natural world as an easy metaphor with seeds which are planted and have a gestation period, right? It's an easy analogy to wrap our minds around the idea that after we plant a seed, after we set a cause in motion, that there will be a period of time, and we don't know how long, until the result comes. So that said, as a big picture, we'll go into it. So never lose sight of the big picture, please. That's why we're here, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. And practice always comes back to that. How can I work in the present moment to create causation for my future happiness, for my future paradise? And how can I stay conscious enough, spiritually intelligent enough, wise enough to not react to what's happening to me in the present moment, and instead of reacting negatively to difficult circumstances, to stay positive and stay virtuous, regardless of whatever the circumstances might be that are ripening in the present moment, and regardless of how it feels in the present moment, whether we're indifferent or whether it's very difficult or whether it's easy. Right? I mean, each of those has its own pitfalls, right? When it's very hard, it's easy to get lost in it. When there's neutral circumstances in the present, it's easy to be mindless. When things are going well, it's easy to just enjoy it and forget about it. Setting up the causations for future enlightenment. Right? So it doesn't matter whether it's going well or badly or neutral. It's hard in any case, for different reasons. Right? All right. So here we go. So Dhammapada Sutra, title, right? 3 meanings of the word Dhamma in the title, right? So first is when you see things directly, you experience a higher reality compared to this reality. You have the experience of another reality. And, we can say there are other realms or other levels of reality, but we don't, for ordinary people, we don't see it directly. We don't necessarily believe it. And rightly so, right? I mean, you can say that, scripturally, the scriptures can say that, but until you see a higher reality, you don't really buy it. And so when we see highest reality, ultimate reality, this reality pales in comparison. Right? And so when you come out of that experience of ultimate reality, the closest the mind naturally looks for some metaphor or analogy analogy or something to compare it to, and the diamond is the closest thing. In that, a diamond is an ultimate here. There aren't many ultimates here. You can always find a bigger thing, a smaller thing. You know, you can always divide it. You can always add to it. But so a diamond is ultimately hard. You know, and it's the purest substance. You know, if you smash a diamond, every piece is equivalently pure. Right, the same structure, the same purity. Right, so. As a result of being pure, that's not what I'm going to say. As a pure substance, you can't see it. You think of if glass were pure, right, and you could look through it and you wouldn't even know that it's there. So if there was a diamond, if there was a foot thick diamond wall between you and I, you wouldn't be able to see it because it's completely pure. And that's another important meaning of the word diamond, and that it's pure. So what does that have to do with emptiness, right? Everything around us has its own emptiness, and we don't see it and we don't perceive it, just like we don't perceive if we had a pure diamond wall in front of us or a pure sheet of diamond in front of us, we wouldn't perceive it, we'd look right through it. Everything has its own emptiness. My fingers has it, my eyebrows, my head, my body, my mind, the air, the fan, everything around us all day, every day has its own emptiness. We are constantly I want to say in touch with, but that's not the right word. We're constantly with it, I guess you could say. Everything in our lives has emptiness, right? And so it's not over there somewhere. It's not some faraway thing. It's not some mystical realm. It's everywhere all the time, and we're not perceiving it. Right? So that's one important element of it. Ultimate truth isn't any further away than this cup or my eyelids or whatever, right? So, but we can't see it. If we could see it for 20 minutes, we would experience we would see our own future enlightenment, right? We would experience the fact that we'll never have meaningful suffering again. We would know that we're on the way out of the suffering realm in a definitive period of time, right? So we have all these amazing experiences. You meet the Dharmakaya of the Buddha directly. So, you know what your future is going to be like, and you can read other people's minds from that. So after that, you don't really have anything to worry about. You're on your way out, stream into it, right? It's like stepping onto a conveyor belt, and you're just automatically going to reach enlightenment after that. You attain something which is so powerful that it will definitively propel you to enlightenment in a short period of time, in a relatively short period of time. It doesn't matter after that. You don't have to worry about anything after that. It's guaranteed. So, and that's the goal of everything that we do as spiritual practitioners, as Buddhists. All the classes, all the lectures, all the quizzes, homeworks, readings, finals, retreats, it's all to bring us to a point where we have a mind which understands emptiness and is steeped in the ideas of ultimate reality, which is so thoroughly exposed to an intellectual understanding of emptiness that we can sit down and meditate with single-pointed concentration and develop the capacity to sit in deep, abiding, single-pointed concentration and perceive emptiness and ultimate reality directly. Right? So that's what all of this is about, and that's what our spiritual practice is about. It's about reaching these spiritual levels and paths and attainments which propel us forward. You know, there are certain benchmarks, there are certain places, certain accomplishments, which if you would reach them and attain them, then there's so much spiritual power and energy and force to that, that it's like lighting a fuse on a rocket, you know? You will blast off and it will take you to your destination. It's really just a question of time. Okay? So the third reason that emptiness is close to a diamond is that, as I said, if you break it, every particle is identical. Emptiness is the same way. The emptiness of my pinky, and the emptiness of the cup, and the emptiness of the fan, all exactly the same. It's not that you have to see the emptiness of a certain mystical thing to have this realization and this attainment. Every emptiness is exactly equal and identical. The emptiness that a person sees the first moment of the path of seeing is exactly the same emptiness that a fully enlightened Buddha sees. There's not a little bit of emptiness and a lot of emptiness. There's emptiness, and it's what it is, and you see it or you don't. And once you see it, it's the exact same perception and the exact same insight and awareness and understanding that a fully enlightened being has. Right? The difference, of course, is a fully enlightened being is abiding in that all the time. And as a meditator, when you first go into the experience, you enter the experience temporarily for whatever period of time. And then you come out of the meditation and you're finished with the direct communion and realization of the experience. And when you're out of it, you're done with it. And you have the experience and the visceral effect and everything that follows on from that. So,
Can I ask a question?
yeah, of course, please.
Can one really say there's an experience of emptiness, or that there is some kind of cognition after a moment after that? Like, is there an experience without the experiencer? And if you're not having a perception of an experiencer at the moment of being.
Yes, I actually, I'm glad you asked. I wanted to correct something that I said last week. I don't remember exactly what I said, but as I was leaving, I thought, well, that wasn't quite specifically precisely accurate. And I think I said towards the end of class something like, we are having projections, right? And we have a projection of ourselves meditating or having a realization. As we have all these projections, they are the basis to have other projections, including the projections to become enlightened, right? And one of the things I believe I said is that emptiness is also a projection, right?
That you have a projection that
You have a
then
projection of
alters the
emptiness.
way you see everything.
That's right. You have a projection of ultimate reality, which is such that it causes you to behave and live and project in a way that leads to enlightenment. Something like that.
Yeah.
That's what I said. So, that's not quite correct. So, the state of ultimate reality is a state free of projections. Right? So, more accurately said, it is a state of awareness. It is a state of experience, and it's a state of awareness, it's a state of consciousness, which does that. Same thing that I described. So it's inaccurate to say it's a projection, right, of ultimate reality. It is an abiding and an experience and a conscious awareness of ultimate reality, right? And it's a state free of projections. It's the absence. It's a state where you have the absence of conceptual projections. You still have consciousness. You still have awareness. You're still abiding with sentience. Right? And not conceptually experiencing.
At the time that you're abiding in it, but in a human form, coming off the experience of emptiness, the minute after, when projections begin to fire off, we begin to add all these meaning and words and terms and paths and directions and
and that's where they're saying the mind looks for something to try to grasp and to try to associate and to try to label and name and identify, right? So
no, and so my mind toggles between the experiencer of the awareness once the awareness names the experience versus being in the experience. So I don't know if it's a linguistic problem of describing the being who is in emptiness versus the one who's describing emptiness.
So there's several important things to say in that regard. One is to understand the three spheres, the subject-object interaction between the two. Me, what's outside of me, and the interaction between the two, And so one perceives the emptiness of oneself initially. One perceives the emptiness of me. And obviously then...
But there is no me to be called me when you're in the perception, is my point.
Right. And so if you think about, which leads to sort of thinking about how a normal meditation retreat goes, right? And this is why retreat is important. If one does retreat, for example, and one does a longer retreat, one can watch the mind become more and more and more subtle as the retreat progresses. So initially, you have coarse, discursive mind, you know? When you say, let's say you're going to do a month or two, or how many weeks? So initially, it's very hard for the discursive mind, the very crude discursive mind, to settle down and calm down and stop thinking about lunch and work and people and all the rest. And at some point it does, right? And then you have more subtle states of mind, which then start to calm down, right? And so then as those more subtle states of mind start to calm down, one goes into more and more and more subtle states of mind. You know, so you're essentially moving through, one is moving from very crude conceptual mind down to more and more subtle, less discursive, less subject-object conceptual states of mind. Right? And so as one does that, as one gets into more subtle, non-conceptual, non-discursive states of mind, and one's abiding there, even without experiencing emptiness directly, one can have the experience of being in calm, in some kind of still, calm, abiding, single-point concentration, where the mind is bright and focused, alert and relaxed, and not thinking crude thoughts of any kind, not even necessarily processing any conceptual content, right? So it's like that, and I think it's appropriate for me, at least personally, it's appropriate to just think of it as a continuation of that process. You know, if you meditate and if you do retreat and if you see your mind going from discursive, primary, crude subject-object to more subtle to more subtle to more subtle, and as you practice, you see how subtle your mind is getting and how it's becoming less and less discursive and less subject-object, and you just keep going. Right? Co-join with virtue, because the only thing that leads to that kind of subtlety is virtue and purity. Ethically, energetically, right? So it's all tied together. Does that? So to get to your point, which is, okay, so you are abiding without thinking about me, Hector, right? Or lunch, or, you know, I'm going to have a realization or anything else, right? And then you have awareness of whatever you experience, right? Well, the goal is to be able to abide like that and trigger the ripening of the perception of emptiness, the very perception of emptiness. Right? So when that happens, one has an experience and then one tries to figure out how to think about it or talk about it, or
afterwards, yeah.
I mean, because to think about it requires cruder levels of mind.
Of course.
So if cruder levels of mind start to arise and assert themselves, you pop out of the subtle meditation. And it's very common that, you know, someone will be in a subtle meditation and something starts to happen and they think a thought. Oh, what's that? Done. Meditation's over. You just lost it. Right? So it's like that. So as you're going into these subtle states of mind, there's a real skill to staying there and abiding there and not going into discursive, coarse states of mind as one is abiding in subtle awareness, right? Subtle experience. So if one is able to stay in subtle states of mind and abide there and not have discursive conceptual mind arise as awareness experiences, right? Then it's a matter of, is one able to trigger, what experience is one having? You know, if one is abiding in subtle, non-conceptual mind, right, in some kind of very pure, deep way, then what arises and what is experienced? You see? And can one stay with it and experience it and not get pulled out of the meditation? And so if that happens, idea, our goal is to be in that subtle, non-discursive state of mind, and to have the karma ripen to abide and experience ultimate reality. Right? And if that happens, that's a direct perception of emptiness, which, again, very subtle mind, right? Completely non-conceptual, non-labeling and naming and projecting, with cruder states of mind, and then at some point you come out of it. However long you're abiding, you abide, and at some point you can't abide anymore, and it's over, and you come out of it, right? And then when you, like any deep meditation, when you come out of it, there's a period of the mind shifting and the mind changing, and the awareness starting to, the different levels of mind starting to arise, and this way, okay, you start to see shapes, you start to see colors, and then, the mind wants to start to label things and say, oh, that's red, oh, that's an altar, oh, that's a room, oh, I'm in a room, and it's back to normal mental process, right? So like that. And you have the experience. And the mind is then trying to do its normal thing of labeling and naming and calling.
That experience, yeah.
What happened, and what do I call it, and how do I think about it, and so that's where we get into then it's like, well, it's kind of like a diamond. I guess that's the closest thing, etc. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's a nice conversation. Did I answer your question? Not really. All right. Well, can you ask the question specifically?
No, I can't.
Okay, all right. Well, then I can't answer it. Even if you
Yeah,
ask it.
I don't think I've got it well formed in my head.
All right. All right. Fair enough. All right. So why is the word cutter in the diamond cutter? Because diamond is close. Diamond has meaning, but it's nothing close to ultimate reality. So.
You don't cut it.
Yeah, don't cut it. That's right. It's the closest thing in the normal world, but how close is it? Not at all. Not even close. So, there's a totally higher level of existence and being, and a diamond isn't even in the ballpark. But it's the best we've got that we can come up with this mind and this conceptual formation. Okay. So, if you see the quality of that level of existence directly, and the day of your enlightenment is decided, and you see it, then you know that cutter is very important. And that the other result is you know what a gotcha is. Remember the gotcha?
Anything we deny.
Gotcha, 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 gotcha. Yeah, to understand emptiness, you have to understand the gotcha. You have to understand what it is that's not there. When we talk about emptiness, we're always saying, things are empty of self-existent nature. Right? It's never enough to say it's empty. If you say it's empty, it's a platitude. It's a spiritual platitude to me. Right? Things are empty of having a nature from their own side, having any nature from their own side. Right? Anything has the potential to be anything. Right? So, this piece of paper, came from trees in a factory, and that's the cause of this piece of paper, right? Not true, right? I understand that maybe the paper is self-existent, maybe there's certain causes that brought it here, right? But it is paper, it has the identity of being paper. It doesn't. It's, depending upon the school you're in and how you talk about it, it's only paper because it has the requisite parts to be paper. It exists in dependence upon certain parts coming together, right? Or it exists in dependence upon certain causes coming together, or it exists in dependence upon me thinking of it and naming it paper, right? Depending upon the school that you're in. So from lower to higher schools, that's dependent origination. Things exist in dependence upon something. The lower schools say parts and causes, and the highest school says projections, right? Names and terms and projections, right? There is no paperness that exists here, independent of being caused, independent of having the parts that get put together, the lignin and the fiber and the blah, 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 blah. And there is no paper here if someone doesn't think of it and call it paper. It's not paper for you or for them, okay? So we want to go with the prasangika, the highest view, right? So when one comes out of the direct perception of emptiness, one has this series of major realizations, right? And there's, you see the day of your enlightenment, how many lifetimes, the kind of families that you'll be born into until you reach enlightenment, the kind of lamas that you have, you meet the Dharmakaya directly. Very often you have a direct experience of bodhicitta, where you feel this incredible love for every living being pouring from your heart, and you see them all directly. And all of these things are grouped into 4 families of amazing things that happen to you afterwards, which are called the
4 Aryan truths.
4 Aryan truths, which are often translated as
4
noble truths, which, it's a noble thing, but it has nothing to do with being noble. These are 4 categories of realizations that occur to an Arya immediately after becoming an Arya. An Arya is someone who has seen emptiness. So after you see emptiness, you're an Arya, and you have these 16 or 20, depending upon how you group it, different things, realizations, which you experience. Yeah.
I often think about this explanation, whether the Buddha had the direct experience of emptiness and then taught the 4 burial truths, or he became fully enlightened.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
Well, if it's the 4 realizations you have
after
you see emptiness directly, and then you typically go through 7 lifetimes, or you still have to go through the path of habituation.
Right.
I wonder whether Gautama Buddha, sitting at the Bodhi tree, had the direct experience of emptiness, and then he taught everybody the 4 Arya truths, or whether he actually became fully enlightened.
Yeah, was he teaching the 4 Arya truths pre-enlightenment or post-enlightenment? It's like that?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, hold on, why did he teach that and then something else?
Yeah, I mean,
That's the first teaching.
This is where you get into people saying, well, was he already enlightened, or wasn't already, So, I don't know if you remember in the Diamond Cutter, there was the guy who was out in the forest, the story of Shakyamuni Buddha in one of his past lives. He was out in the forest, sitting happily and quietly, nicely. And
King Kalinka.
Yeah. And the king's wife wandered into the forest and saw him and ended up chatting him up about, talking about sweet Dharma things. And I wasn't there. Anyway, the king and his hunting party came upon him, and they ended up doing it suspiciously and tying him, stapling him down to the ground and tying him down to the ground, dismembering him bit by bit, starting with his finger and toes and chopping him up into little bits, right? And he talked, and this is the Buddha saying, this is in one of my past lives, this was me, and what happened was, at that point is I used my understanding of emptiness, I used my understanding of causation, independent origination, and projections, and the nature of reality, to not get angry at that moment, because, it hurt like hell. It hurts to have someone cut you up. It's excruciatingly painful, right? And so, this example addresses one of those misconceptions about spiritual realizations or seeing emptiness, right? Because one sees emptiness or becomes an Arya or has whatever spiritual realization, doesn't mean you don't have problems or pain or suffering or whatever else the case might be, right? It still hurts, it's still painful. So, it's not the case that like you saw emptiness and therefore you can just all of a sudden, wish any problem away or you never have another negative karma, right?
I thought that was a teaching that he didn't have pain. Like Geshe-la taught that in the ACI 11 or 10 as not experiencing pain.
Well, so I can't say that if you had pain or not.
Yeah.
But there are multiple points in the example. One of which is that bad stuff still happens.
Yeah.
And it's still unpleasant. And that even though negative karmas are ripening into suffering, right?
He didn't react. Yeah.
So there's several things. One is you can take a Michael, you can take this person, and you can say that having a realization of emptiness does not mean when you go to the dentist it doesn't hurt when you grow your teeth, right? You still have pain, you still have suffering, right? Because you've collected those karmas and they're not finished yet. You have to. I mean, that's the point of the 4th path, right? The path of seeing is the 3rd of the 5th paths, right? So you have the path of seeing, and then after the path of seeing, you have to go through the path of habituation, where you get rid of all your negative karmas as a result of seeing empty, to become enlightened, right? The path of no more learning, the fifth path, right? So that fourth path, you're still going to have all the issues of negative karmas ripening until they're cleaned up and finished completely. So the Buddha was saying at that point, he was saying that, did I get angry at that point? No, I didn't get angry at that point, because I understood where this is coming from, right? I created the causes for this. He created the causes for this, right? It's not a question of, oh, I saw emptiness, no, I'll just pretend everything's okay. You know, I am being cut up. He is being cut up. And the present situation is painful. The karma has ripened. What am I going to do in the present moment for the future, right? And so he's saying that, you know, he refuses to perpetuate the violence. He refuses to perpetuate the anger. He refuses to perpetuate the negativity, which will cause this to occur again because of wisdom. Because of understanding emptiness, he's saying, this hurts. It's coming to me because I caused it. You know, of course I don't like it. Of course it's unpleasant. Of course it's miserable. And I'm not going to feel violence and hatred and the rest towards the person or people who are doing this to me, right? So he's hurt someone in the past, and he's just decided he's not going to perpetuate it. And so, you know, what Buddha says, if I had gotten angry and I had perceived the king as self-existent, then I could have gotten. Sorry, he's saying, if I had perceived the king who was cutting me up as self-existent, then I could have gotten angry. Because if you see things as self-existent, easy to have mental afflictions. If you see things as empty, you can't have mental afflictions. You can't have a mental affliction towards something which you don't believe is self-existent. I caused it, I did this, I brought it about, it's about me. How could I be angry at the guy over there? It's all about me. Right? Okay. And so the Buddha is saying, I didn't get angry. And that's why I'm the Buddha now, instead of a schmuck who's suffering for however many more lives. And the Shakyamuni Buddha is saying, like, this happened to me, I used wisdom, I didn't get angry, I didn't perpetuate it, I broke the cycle, and that's why I'm not just another guy who is having trouble in another however many lifetimes, right? All right. So it hurt, and he refused to get angry, and he refused to see him as self-existent when the events is self-existent, right? And so he broke the circle. Is it natural to do that? No. Mm-hmm. Is it hard to do that? Yes. Right? Completely. Does it stop samsara and the circle of suffering? Absolutely, completely. It's the only way, right? And that's the whole point, right? He was able to practice the true perfection of patience as opposed to regular patience, right? Regular patience is what? Well, my mom told me not to get mad when Billy hits me. Okay? There's no wisdom in that. It's just somebody told me not to do it, so I don't do it, and I'm being patient and I'm turning the other cheek, right? Perfection of patience is understanding the emptiness of the situation, right? And choosing your behavior based upon understanding the nature of higher reality, right?
I have a question that is related to this discussion. You know, this whole idea of, you know, the thought stopping, which it seems like, you know, momentarily, you know, there are moments when they stop and then the thought comes in, and you know, whether it's, you know, like in a moment of waking up in the middle of the night and trying to get back to sleep, or during meditation, or just doing sort of any task, like sort of staying focused, sort of staying, you know, in the moment rather than the myriad things that are going on. And you know, we're interpreting this text, you know, in this age, which is, you know, so very different than a few decades ago, or a few hundred years ago, or a few thousand years ago. I mean, do you think that the Buddha was as prone to distraction as we are with all this stuff?
Oh, I think it's one of the degenerations of our you know, our time. I don't know because I wasn't there, but I mean, I've heard it said that even, you know, 100 or 200 or 300 years ago, you know, monks would recite vast numbers of texts from memory, you know, and the people could memorize and hold in their memory vast quantities of information, you know, and the capacity of their mind was much greater and they're much stronger minds because they use them, you know. So yeah, what's one of our issues is this, you know, is the short attention span, inability to focus and retain things.
Like more access, but
Yeah, information overload. I mean, you know, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, wasn't radio, wasn't TV, wasn't internet. You know, it was just you and nature, and the people around you, and you know, your thoughts. Right? Very different. Yeah, absolutely. No question. You know, and in the monastery, certainly, you know, even now, they spend their entire day just memorizing and developing the muscles of their mind. You know, memorizing hundreds of pages of text, word for word. I couldn't, God knows how long it would take me to memorize one page. You know?
And then to add to it, we have misinformation because we have so much information.
Yeah.
We have perspectives from all over the place, so we don't just have to sort out more data, we have to sort out more data and then put the filter of the bullshit filter through it and go, which one is correct?
So, you know, the perfection of patience is that you're empty and the boss at work or a family member or partner or whatever, and they're a pain in the butt or a jerk or whatever expletive you want to use, because my past karma. You know, I caused it, I created it, and I'm not going to get angry at them, and I'm not going to react negatively to them because I caused it and I created it, and I don't want to meet that again in the future. Period. That's all. That's perfection of patience. I'm not getting angry because I don't want to have this situation again in the future because I know where it came from, and I know if I collect the causes, I know I'll experience it again. And so that's just at work and with the family, day to day, moment to moment, you know, all life long. Right? So, okay. So, let's take a little break here, and then we'll go on to the next subject. All right?
You want, John, you hungry? You want anything?
Just want some chocolate.
You want chocolate? No, I want chocolate now.
Did it melt in the heat or is it okay? Did it survive?
It's a little soft. No, I think it's more fudgy.
Good.
Would you like to share?
I've got a box at home.
Would you like to share some of this?
Probably. But after, let me finish here.
Okay. It says mixed truffles. They're all mixed together now.
They're good. They're like really, really good. Handmade.